Is Terrence Graves on the hot seat? And is La Tech the surprise story of 2025? We'll be answering those questions and so much more on a Whistle to Whistle Wednesday edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. And welcome everyone to the Louisiana Lunch Hour, a new episode dropping for you on a big old Wednesday. Happy hump day to you. Hopefully you are having a great one so far, and I'd appreciate it if you did leave us a follow on Spotify or subscribe to us today on our YouTube channel. That thing is growing and we got some great exclusive content going up there each and every day of the week. Just like this pod drops every single weekday right around lunchtime to give you the latest goings on with your favorite teams across the state of Louisiana. And this week's a little bit of an interesting week. Whenever I was mapping out the schedule for the show, turns out you've got the Tulane Green Wave, LSU Tigers, and the Louisiana Raging Cajuns all on byes this week. And I don't want to continue to just deride what's going on with LSU and the tough loss to Ole Miss and breaking that down even further, because honestly, it's getting a little tiresome and we need to move on. And it feels like a good time of the week to go look at three teams in particular to break down, and that is the La Tech Bulldogs, the Southern Jaguars, and the McNeese State Cowboys. Why am I bringing those three up? Because I think they each have three very interesting stories and different arcs that I want to kind of explore a little bit more, because we don't talk about them nearly as much as maybe we should. Because again, the Saints, the Tigers, and to a lesser extent, depending where you're from, the Cajuns run things. They are the program everybody is following, and they like what they've been seeing as of late over the last few years. Now, that said, La Tech has to be a team that we have to talk about when it comes to the end of the season. And we look at everything and it's like, man, this team is out kicking its coverage and then some, mainly because of how they've performed this season compared to what they did last year. I said it all the way back within the first week of the pod, where this thing was just 3 days a week. And then we eventually kind of figured out, okay, we can do 5 days a week, no problem. The big debate surrounding La Tech was that Sonny Cumbie was probably on one of the hottest seats in the state of Louisiana besides Brian Kelly. And it was justified. Last year wasn't necessarily that great. There was a lot of heat on him because obviously when you lose the games that you lost, and you kept it very competitive for much of that 2024 season, things just didn't look that great from our perspective as a fan base. But now we sit here and they are 4-1, and they've got an open date before a Thursday night game against Kennesaw State. And it's 4-1, and even then that one loss to LSU made you look a lot better. Seriously, look at what they did against LSU, 23-7 loss. That game on paper should have been at least 35-7, or if not that, 42-7 or 42-14, something like that. It should have been way more lopsided, but obviously, as we've observed, LSU's offense is not that great. But you look at the other games, 24-0 against Southeastern. There was a big knock that they had from what I was able to see was the offense wasn't there. Like you were outgained yardage wise, but still were able to shut out Southeastern. New Mexico State, you held them to 14 points and steamrolled them 49-14. Great job. You beat your former CUSA and future Sun Belt rival in Southern Miss by 10 points. And a lot of people I was seeing on social media all week long were just demolishing them on social, saying we're going to beat y'all. It's going to look too easy, blah, blah, blah. La Tech, it wasn't belt to ass type of win, but it was a win that made you kind of stand up and take notice. Because again, this is a team, Southern Miss, that a year ago, they fire their head coach. You wind up going to get a new head coach within the conference that had just won a Sun Belt Conference championship, and then a lot of that team pretty much defected over to Hattiesburg, and there's a lot of hype surrounding that program. Southern Miss has looked pretty mediocre to start the season, 2-2, but even then, just based off of the hype heading into that game, it felt like maybe La Tech could have lost that one. I said it on the pod 2 weeks ago. I feel like this is the game where things would start to fall off the rails. Lo and behold, that wasn't the case. Then Sonny Cumbie comes back around on Saturday with a 30-11 win over UTEP that was highlighted by 5 turnovers. That is an incredible statistic. Just like, seriously, it's probably one of the best performances I've seen from La Tech in a hot minute. La Tech has not been that great in recent years, but they have shown themselves to be pretty doggone good on the defensive side of the football. And here's the thing. I think their defense is the thing that highlights there is 13.6 points per game you are allowing. That is 17th best in the entire country. Your defense is performing at a incredibly consistent clip. That is what you want to see if you are a defensive coordinator, what you want to see if you are Louisiana Tech right now. Again, that is just a feather in the cap and then some for this program. To see what Tech has been able to do over the last couple seasons, it's nice to see. It's just very refreshing to see a program be at that level. Of course, the amount of yardage they've allowed per game when it comes to the passing yards, not necessarily as great because they're sitting at 94th nationally, but still, it's pretty decent. 240.8 yards per game, 11.15 yards per completion. So at the end of the day, like, you can kind of just take solace in knowing that this defense is good, not necessarily elite, but they're getting the job done against their opponents. But at the same time, it is hurting. It is hurting them to see Blake Baker, and we're not talking about LSU's guy they have at the coaching staff. No, we're talking about the quarterback for the Bulldogs. He hasn't shown a lot out of him. I haven't seen a lot out of him that's making me say, hey, this offense is going to lead the way. I think especially based off of what they've done in holding teams outside of Southern Miss and LSU, you've held them under 20 points a game. That is impressive to see. You take those 2 games out of there, even then, holding teams to under 30 these days seems like it's more and more of an incredible feat. And winning by good margins, that is a refreshing as hell thing to see. So hopefully they can kind of get the ball rolling now that the calendar has officially flipped over to the month of October. And I think their schedule lends them some favors. You have Kennesaw State this coming Thursday on October 9th. Then you have a little bit of a gap before you take on Western Kentucky. And then a Halloween night matchup against Sam Houston. You've got a pretty light October schedule. And that's pretty much the bulk of your conference slate. You're going to deal with Wazoo in November. I think you have a genuine chance to, more likely than not, I'd say make it to 8-4. And if you do that, that's a huge leap up if you are Sonny Cumbie. And I wouldn't be surprised if they would say, hey, let's go ahead and offer him an extension and shake his hand and say, hey, thanks for all that you've done for us, bud. Because it's been impressive to say the least. One thing that hasn't been impressive, though, has to be the Southern Jaguars. This has been something I talked about on the pod on Monday, but I wanted to get more into it today because, yikes, you are looking at a team that has lost a lot of very close games, but this is a program that doesn't like to lose all that often. Seriously, look at what they've done. They're going to be off this week, going to go play on October the 11th. That's the next game against BCU. And we're not talking about Boston College. You started off the season. You have one win on your record. You're 1-4 to start the 2025 season with a disheartening loss to North Carolina Central. The only real highlight there was a former LSU Tiger, Trey Holly, putting on an 80-yard score. That was really it. Then you barely eke out a win against Mississippi Valley Delta State. That's not a great win, not great feather in the cap. You had your quarterback get injured. Thankfully, he seems to be okay, but you had to go back to the guy that was the QB1 in the loss to North Carolina Central. And then the wheels have continued to fall off. Alabama State, you lose 30-7, 56-7 to Fresno State, which I think that one was kind of justified. But then you lose to Jackson State, another game that you probably should have at least kept competitive, but you lose 38-13. That entire team, you have to look in the mirror. And I think Terrence Graves is the guy that you're looking at. And you got to say, hey, we can't be doing this. We cannot be doing this in 2025. We are not performing at the level that we're expected of us. Again, last year, that team made it all the way to the SWAC championship game to lose to Jackson State. And that was after Coach Prime left. And you went from that to only one win on your record this year. That is not good at all. You can't be having that with this program that has liked to win a lot and has been consistent. Again, it's his second year, and he's sitting at 9-5. 9-5. Thankfully, they've got some extra time to rest up and get their mind right, because you've got a really tough schedule the rest of the way. You got BCU, you've got Prairie View. Hey, they kind of rhymed. And then Florida A&M to wrap up the month of October. And then you wrap up the season with Arkansas Pine Bluff, Alcorn State, Texas Southern. And then, of course, the big game against Grambling. And I kind of firmly believe that if Terrence Graves can't get this done against Grambling, there's going to be a serious conversation. And I feel like he could be given Das Boot before next season, if that happens. I feel like the conversation is going to go one of two ways. And I firmly believe we're going to get Terrence Graves being sat down and saying, hey, you've got to do better, or we're going to cut you. You were going to be on a very short leash in 2026 if that loss to Grambling happens. If they can turn it around after this bye week, a lot of things can change. It's the old saying, winning cures all ills. Seriously, look at what the Cajuns did with that win over Marshall in double overtime. People aren't talking about the fact that, you're now 2-3. People aren't talking about that. You know what they are talking about? The fact that you had a phenomenal performance from your QB3 who got it done. And more importantly, you got a nationally televised game on a Saturday. That's a huge feather in the cap. Now, mind you, it's more because JMU is a good team, but it's still something you got to look at. And we were talking about La Tech and the Southern Jaguars. They all have the week off this week. It's just very weird how the month of October, the first week, a lot of teams are taking off. Two teams that aren't in the state of Louisiana are McNeese and Southeastern Louisiana. And in the case of McNeese, again, you bring back Matt Viator, the prodigal son of Lake Charles. He had that team firing on all cylinders for a minute, but now we're sitting here, and a lot like Southern, they only have one win on their record, and that is the win over Louisiana Christian University. Yeah, that's the one win they have, a 54-9 win. They got relatively embarrassed, 34-10 to the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. Then you lose to Weber State in a nail-biter of a game. Then you go over to Utah State for a West Coast road trip, and they pound your face in, 48-7. And then you lose to Stephen F. Austin 34-17. Again, I don't want to kind of denigrate this program or count them out, because there is still plenty of time left to determine what the rest of the season looks like for McNeese. They've got Southeastern Louisiana this weekend, Houston Christian. Then they take on Nichols to end the month of October. There's still a lot of ball left to be played. But I wonder aloud, I don't think they'll fire Matt Viator in his first year. Heck, they might just let his whole contract run through before making a true decision. Just because I think they like the guy. I think they like what he's capable of, and they want to see what he can do and let him cook using his ingredients. But I'm sure there are people out there in the Chuck that are sitting at home, maybe you listen to this podcast. And if you are, make sure you go ahead and hit the follow button. And I think there is a case of some buyer's remorse when it comes to what's going on with the Cowpokes up in Lake Charles, because he came back to the program after being around at UL Monroe, and obviously his contract ran out over there. Then you had Gary Goff, and that thing didn't necessarily work out all that well. Lo and behold, now you have your guy back, the guy that brought you back into some form of prominence back in the mid-2000s. Again, he left to go to greener pastures, so to speak, over at UL Monroe. And that program fell like a lead balloon. Now it looks like the team is at least a little bit better in 2025. But at McNeese, he's sitting there for the first time in a while, 1-4 with a losing record. You look at his career at McNeese, he only had 4 or 5 seasons where he had 4 or more losses. 6-2 his first year, 11-1 his second. He had 9-3 in his fourth year. Then his last year, he went 10-1 and lost in the second round of the NCAA Division I playoffs, the FCS playoffs. Think about that. He had a great career, and now he's coming back from the nostalgia pop, and I'm wondering if there's some buyer's remorse. I'm hoping there's not. But at the end of the day, this program got a little jolt, but now it feels like maybe that battery's a little corroded and you need to jumpstart it again. And I'm not saying, Matt Viator's on the hot seat. There's no way they're going to fire a coach after 1 year. You'd be absolutely out of your mind to do so. But I wonder, it's like that old saying, love being better, even better the second time around. I don't think that's the case here. I don't think going back to the same head coach you had all those years ago is going to rekindle anything. Looking at you, Arkansas, the Razorbacks bringing back into the fold Bobby Petrino as a head coach in interim, but I would not be surprised if he's the permanent head coach and that program will continue to falter. But I digress. I'm about to wrap up the pod, and if you haven't already, make sure you go follow us on social media. All you got to do is search Louisiana Lunch Hour. Go check us out on YouTube as well at Louisiana Lunch Hour. Subscribe to us today. That way you don't miss a thing, especially when it comes to our exclusive content on that platform. And until tomorrow on a big old Thursday, we'll talk to you later.